Howdy folks, welcome back to the channel. I am finally getting around to doing a series I've been wanting to do for a while, and that is on one of my other games, Simple Planes. In this game, you can create more than just planes. You can make your plane, a car, or a boat, or even a saxophone, or a hot dog cart, or a skyscraper. The possibilities are endless. Today I am going to show you a little basic tutorial on how to make a twin-engine jet. So you start off with your cockpit. I tend to delete the two fuselage blocks that start with the sample cockpit because back in the early days of Simple Planes, I started playing in 2016, but in like 2014 and 15, you could only use blocks. But now, thankfully, you have more detailed 3D parts. So I start off with the fuselage section here, then add another one, make that smaller, and then I attach the fuselage cone, change its shape to curved, and now I have the nose. So we're going to increase the length of the fuselage and add them more, increase their length. You can increase it up to 10, but I like to do it in 5 because that's what it used to be the limit in Simple Planes, and that's just how I like it. As you see, the rise moves the fuselage up and down, the run makes it go left to right, and so on. As you can see, the fuselage can go up to 10, but I like to keep it at 10 because it goes by the old rules, and you can easily manage the weight of the aircraft. Which in this game, it's important to evenly distribute the weight. Next, I add the main wing, which will be essential in giving the plane lift. And then I'm going to work some more on the fuselage to make it more realistic at the tail. So we're going to make that shorter. I tend to experiment with the lengths of the fuselages to see which one I like best, and this is no exception. So now I'm going to rise it up a bit, and you can also type in a custom increment in case you want it at a very specific one other than the default. So here I'm going to make it, let's see, make it about, let's see, 30 should be good, or 35. Okay, 40. I recorded this without narration because, as my old rule goes, I find it useful to record and then narrate later in case there's some kind of interruption, such as the dog barking or annoying background noise. So I'm watching this as I narrate, and I tend to forget what some of the things I've done, but I remember the important stuff. So now I'm going to add another fuselage cone at the rear for aesthetic purposes. You don't need to add all of these parts, but sometimes I add them just so they look nice. And you're probably wondering, why did I not add another wing to the left side? Well, I'll explain later in the video. But for now, the cockpit looks odd, so I'm going to add, there's two ways to complete the cockpit. One, you can add another cockpit part, as you see here. But in this case, we're going to change the cockpit from the standard cockpit to the sleek cockpit. Now, you cannot delete the main cockpit. So how do you remove or change it? Well, you click on another cockpit piece, click Set as Main, delete the one you don't want, and you have your cockpit. So how am I going to complete this one to make it look a bit more realistic? The way I like to do it is I add another fuselage part, change its length to 1 by 1, add another length so it'll be even, delete the excess, attach, set it to hard, and you're going to like what you could do in Simple Planes here. You can customize the shape a bit more. So if you set it to manual, corners 1 and 4 do the top parts, and corners 2 and 3 do the bottom. So I'm going to set the same for the rear. Change that to smooth. Add another one. Oops, excuse me. Make that a little shorter. Add another piece. Set rise down. You can set height to 0. And then boom, you have a realistic cockpit. So now, one thing I like to do is I change it from the default to custom paint. It's a little bugged at the moment. Well, it's actually been that way for a while, but it's easy to fix. One thing I find especially useful, and I highly recommend if you're designing your own plane, whether it be 20 minutes like in this video or several hours, you can literally spend several hours designing your planes or cars or boats. The possibilities are endless, but you're probably wondering, why paint it gray? Well, gray is a nice neutral color, and if you work at a 3D studio, either professionally or amateur, in a professional or in this case an amateur setting, setting your 3D models to gray will put less strain on your eyes than a large white image. So now I am changing the, I'm not going to try to pronounce that word. Yeah, it starts with the D, but you can change the elevation of the said part, which kind of adds a nice aesthetic look to it, but at the same time you got to keep in mind it will to a certain degree affect the aerodynamic efficiency of your plane. Next, we add another essential part, the vertical stabilizer. When I was designing this, for some reason the vertical stab was a little bit higher off of its fuselage than it should have been, but it was fairly easy to fix. So now we're going to go to the fuselage and add something that no plane can fly without, unless you're using a glider, which in this case we're not. Fuel. You can put fuel in the wings, or more efficiently, you can put it in the fuselage. I recommend doing a certain degree of both, because the wings only hold so much fuel, but the fuselage, depending on how big your plane is, can hold a lot of fuel. Next, we're going to be adding the engines, and I'm going to be using the Blasto J15. It's a starter jet engine. It's not the most powerful. In fact, it's the smallest and least powerful engine. But at the same time, it'll get you off the ground if your plane's light enough. And it's very fuel efficient compared to the bigger jet engines. So I'm going to add a favorite aesthetic of mine. I was so happy when this came out, was the custom fuselage inlet. You don't need it for all jet engines, but if you want it for looks, as I do, then it's helpful. Or if you put the engines in the back, like you would a fighter plane. Because without them, if there's something blocking the intake of that jet engine, it'll run, but its performance will be severely impacted. So it's very highly recommended you have a fuselage inlet for that purpose. So next, let's see, we're going to add some landing gear. So we're starting off with the nose gear. I don't know why it's sinking through the platform, but we're going to paint that real quick. I don't know why it tends to paint the tires black or white instead of black, but it's an easy fix. Next, we are going to add, if I can just get it, wing landing gear. You can also add another fuselage landing gear, the rear landing gear, but for this design, we are going to be using the wing landing gear, which retracts and snugs into the wing. It's not the most realistic design, but it helps in this game. Aha! So I mirrored everything as you saw there. So if you click, once you design, it's recommended I would recommend you design one side at a time, and then when you're done, you can mirror it. Unless you add specific parts, like let's say an antenna on the left wingtip and not the right. In which case you can copy it and then just delete the wing outlet the wing tip. I'm sorry, I'm losing my words for thought. But I'm going to start on the runway. So as you can see here, it is a little back heavy, or at least it looks that way. But the wings are a bit too high. I meant to do a low wing route rather than a middle one. And I apologize if I get the terminologies confused. I'm sure some of you enthusiasts out there are like, it's not called that. Well, in Simple Planes, it's simplified. No pun intended. But seriously, as interested as I am in these subjects, I can't remember all those technical fancy terms. I just can't. Oops, that's a bug where if you click undo at a certain wing position, whoops, it'll move the plane. It's been that way ever since I first started playing Simple Planes. I kind of wish they would fix that, but moving on. you need to select connected parts and then move it down, and that should be correct. Move that a little back. No, that's too far back. 11, that should be fine. So now we're going to try again. Oops. And sometimes that will happen. A part, when you mirror a part, it's kind of an odd part for the vertical fin to come off, but it'll sometimes not register as being connected even though it looks that way in the editor. The simple fix is just simply to move the part and then move it back to where it was before. I'm going to demonstrate if it was like, let's say, a wing, or excuse, not a wing, an engine, for example, a wing-mounted engine. So what we'll do is I'm going to try to copy the right end, or change the right engine's location to match that of the left engine. Okay, so I kind of messed up a little bit on that, where I couldn't get the XYZ correct, so I just skipped to this part where I actually said it correct. So as you can see, the right engine falls off because for some reason the game does not register it as connected to a source part. So usually the easiest way to fix that is to simply go to the other end where it is connected and mirror it. Now sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, as you see here. So if that happens again, the real best solution is simply to remove both the wing and the engine, copy it from the left side, or whichever one is the part where it's actually connected, and then reconnect it via mirror. So now let's see how this thing flies. So we're accelerating nice and quick, and we are at liftoff. We're at takeoff, I mean. We're not flying a rocket ship. So far it's flying nice and smooth, and as you can see it's not the fastest plane, but it gets the job done. Now one thing I didn't realize at the time when I was making this plane is that I made the elevator a bit too small. The ailerons and the rudder were perfect, but if I need to pull up in a hurry, yeah, that happens. And I crash. But sometimes crashing is fun, because if you crash your plane, no problem, you can just restart with ease. And I intentionally blew it up by pressing F10, which will blow up the fuselage and destroy the other parts. The main cockpit is invincible. It'll never get destroyed no matter how hard you crash your plane. It's also where the camera will tend to follow. So let's see. Not more like that. That should be big enough. And I'm also going to make the wing a little larger and a bit more swept so we can go a little faster. So we're going to move the landing gear a bit and move the engine. I think that looks good. Let's see. So as you can see, if there's too much weight in the back or in the front, in this case in the back, this will tend to happen. You will spin out of control. Now I know my left rear elevator was missing, but even if it was there, I still would have fallen back. And don't ask me how these are what these stand for, but the COT, COL, and COM, which are yellow, blue, and red respectively, you want the red always ahead of the blue. If the red is behind the blue, then it's most likely to spin out, just as you saw in the previous demonstration. So if that is the case where there's too much weight on one end of the aircraft, hopefully it's just front to back and not side to side, you can add additional fuselage parts, make them smaller like 1x1, and then you can just add more, as many as you want, and then put their dead weight to about 1,000 pounds. That's the maximum allowable in simple planes. So in this case, the plane is perfectly balanced, so we're not going to add those other parts. Now we can go on to painting. You can custom... That's what I like about the custom paint job, is you can add all kinds of different colors. For this design, I'm using blue and red because I like the design. And yeah, make that oh my goodness, the red a bit more refined. Color the landing gear red, and yeah, we can save the plane. YouTube Jet 1. The reason I put A before YouTube is so it can be close to the top of the list. Something I forgot to mention earlier in the video. And another useful thing I like to add, you're going to love this too if you design your own plane, whether big, small, or in between, is an air brake. I don't know when air brakes were introduced, but they've been around as long as I've been playing Simple Plane, since 2016, and they are super useful. If you're going too fast or just want to help slow down on landing, just as in real life, air brakes are incredibly useful. In all my fighter plane designs, I use air brakes. And another, whether if you're flying a combat plane or an ordinary racing or other civilian plane, oh, I don't have that yet. Ah, yes. Is a little custom part I like to use that I made is the tiny rotator. Well, what is it for? Well, generally the rotator is to use to rotate parts, or as I like to use it on some of my designs, not this one, but in my other designs, is to help control the elevator, like on the F-86 Sabre, that it had a swing elevator, which instead of just part of the elevator, like as you see in the video with the red part of the tail or the elevator moving up and down, the whole wing moves up and down. So that's useful in my heavier designs. But another thing I like to add, whether if it's a fighter plane or even a plane like this just for aesthetic purposes, are countermeasures dispensers. And what these are, they basically throw things like chaff and flares, and it just looks fun. Oops, I want to start on the ground. So now we're going to take this plane for a quick spin again to see how the change to the elevator helped its performance. Much more smooth. I'm definitely satisfied. And that rotator I showed you, with the help of that rotator part, is it automatically gives you the ability to trim your elevator. Like if you're going slightly too high up or down, just adjust that little bar to the right, and you can adjust your trim to a certain degree. Definitely turns a lot better than the original tail design. Turns nice and smooth. And fairly agile too. Yep, building planes is quite fun. And those air brakes come in handy to help slow you down. Can help you get to a pretty low speed too. Now I think we're gonna throw the dispensers, flares. They are limited, unfortunately. You can fire, if you have just one, it can be 16 times. So I have 4 of them, so you fire 4 at a time. But it is a nice look. So now, you can also deploy them while on the ground. I don't recommend firing a bunch of them all at once while on the ground because it can lag you a bit with the smoke flares. Even on my PC, it makes it lag just a little. Thankfully, in this video, you can't really tell. Whoop. Okay, well, now you did, but nonetheless. Hey, kitty. My cat is staring at me. Standing up on her hind legs. She's like poking at my arm. Anyhow, so now we're going to take this plane into land. So we cut throttle. Slow down naturally and then use the air brakes to help slow us down more. Trim the elevator. And in the future, oh yeah, deploy landing gear, slow down. Keep a little bit of engine power so you don't stall. Speed up just a little bit. We don't want to stall. Otherwise, we'll crash into the ground. $50, $40, $30, $20, $10, touchdown. Perfect landing. The air brakes also help too when landing. So yeah, that's how you build a basic plane. In the future, I will be making more videos for simple planes, various designs, and challenges too. One thing I forgot to mention is you want to make the nose landing gear turnable because by default the ability to turn it is off. So I'll be sure to make some more videos on this game in the future, and in a follow-up video I will give more details on what you can expect to see in this game. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and until next time, peace out.